Not much is known or said about Maggie Murdaugh, the person she was, and about her finances. Not much is known about what Maggie Murdaugh knew about the family's finances and Alex Murdaugh's finances before he murdered her on June 7th, 2021. The rest of this video will be about what we do know about Maggie Murdaugh, her finances, and what she knew about Alex Murdaugh's finances.
Murders, was she anxious about anything?
She was worried because a lawsuit had been presented stating that they wanted $30 million. Maggie was crying. Maggie said, we don't have that kind of money. She said, we don't have that. She said, if I could give them everything that I got and make this go away, she said, I would do it in a heartbeat. She said, I'll start over. We'll start over. She said, I just want it gone.
Would that be like money issues that she was worried about?
The money issues dealing with the lawsuit.
If Maggie Murdaugh was anxious about the money issues dealing with a lawsuit, I have to wonder about her level of anxiety if she knew about or when she knew about the millions of dollars that her husband, Alex, stole from clients, friends, and from the people he says he did love and some that he still loves.
That I have stolen money that did not belong to me, that I misled people to do it, people that I cared about, still care about, a lot of them that I love.
It is my opinion and the opinion of many. Alex Murdaugh's motive for murdering his wife Maggie and son Paul is wrapped up somewhere in the bitter elixir of greed and grandiose pride in the once good family name Murdaugh. For it is on the day of the murders that happened on the eve of June 7th, 2021, did Alex Murdaugh start to put his financial affairs in order in foreboding preparation to reveal all of his financial entanglements just 3 days later when he was to appear in front of a judge in the very same court his family sat at the helm of for generations. When attorney Mark Tinsley would motion for the court to compel Alex Murdaugh's financial records open up uninhibited for all of Hampton County and the world to see.
You've testified that you had made it very clear to the defense throughout this time period that you were seeking a substantial personal recovery from Alec and had been told, well, he's broke, which you then responded, I don't believe that. Show me the books, correct?
Correct.
And that was what was on the table for June 10th, 2021, correct?
Among other things, but
Among
yes.
other things. But that's on the table, correct?
Correct.
That's right. Scheduled for just 3 days after the murder of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh was Alex Murdaugh's appearance in court with Mark Tinsley when he was compelling Alex Murdaugh to have all of his financial records open so he could examine them because he did not believe that he was out of money. So, could it be that on June 7th, 2021, when Alex Murdaugh's secretary and chief financial officer, Jeannie Seckinger, called him out about some of the shenanigans he had been playing that were going to eventually lead to the unraveling of his lies that had been going on for years, that he had been stealing from his clients. To date, we know on record he had stolen at least $9.3 million from his clients. Was that enough pressure to cause Alex Murdaugh to murder his wife Maggie and his son Paul? When pressed on the stand, Alex Murdaugh himself says that on that date, June 7th, 2021, he was getting his financial affairs in order in preparation for the boat case, in preparation for that June 10th date when he'd go face-to-face with Mark Tinsley, who is a pit bull of an attorney. When asking the question, was this enough to be the motive for him to murder his wife Maggie and his son Paul, we need to ask the critical question, what exactly did Maggie Murdaugh know? To understand what Maggie Murdaugh knew, we have to understand who Maggie Murdaugh was, what her state of affairs was as far as her finances, and what she knew about her husband, Alex Murdaugh's finances as well. Mandy Matney of the Murdaughmurders podcast spoke to some people who knew Maggie Murdaugh in life. She said that one person described Maggie Murdaugh as being very likable in college. She said that this person said, and I quote, that she was too good for that jerk Alex Murdaugh. Another person who knew Maggie Murdaugh told the New York Post that Maggie Murdaugh was a polite person who never met a stranger. And as I said earlier, it's hard to find anything out about Maggie Murdaugh's life, and some of this might be because people don't like to speak unfavorably of the dead, and understandably so. The purpose of talking about Maggie Murdaugh, who she was in life, and what she knew about Alex Murdaugh in this video is by no means to disparage her, but just to get the facts out, so please know that. Maggie Murdaugh was born Margaret Kennedy Branstetter, and she was born in the Nashville area in 1968 to parents Kennedy and Terry Branstetter. Kennedy and Terry moved the family several times when Maggie was growing up, according to the New York Post. Maggie went to Unionville High School in Pennsylvania before she moved to South Carolina, and she remained in South Carolina for the rest of her days. In South Carolina, she attended the University of South Carolina in Columbia in the 1980s, where she met Alex Murdaugh as an undergrad. She was a Kappa Delta at the University of South Carolina, and she was very proud of being a Kappa Delta. Maggie had one sister, Marion Proctor, who lives in Charleston. Her parents still live in the Charleston area, and her family has not issued a statement or spoken to reporters since the murders, as far as we know. According to many sources, Maggie was always competing with her sister Marianne about wealth and possessions, and apparently her sister and her sister's husband made more than she and Alec did, and that always bothered Maggie. According to a Daily Mail article from back in 2022, Alex Murdaugh and his late wife argued over dwindling funds and bounced checks weeks before she and their son Paul were murdered. An insider said that their marriage was absolutely on the rocks, and Alex was already checked out of the family before the tragic incident took place. The source said, Alex and Maggie didn't look at each other like they were married. There was no love lost between them. I never saw them touch or be affectionate to one another. They continued by claiming the duo's financial issues got so bad that Maggie started squirreling money away in her closet. The source says, I don't know if it was because she was planning to leave or because she knew that she didn't always have the money to pay the bill. She confronted him about money more than once, and his response was always the same. He would say, oh, leave it to me, Mags. I'll figure it out just like I did the last time. According to many reports, Maggie knew Alex was dealing with an opiate addiction and had been dealing with it for a while, but the money problem was apparently new to her. The source says, I remember one day, it must have been a few months before she was killed. She was crying because she had written a check to a charity at a luncheon and it had bounced. She thought that there must have been some mistake, but when she found out that there wasn't, she was mortified and upset. The source also explained that Maggie never had to think about money while married to Alec. So she was picking her battles when she started to question him about their funds. The family friend also disclosed that Maggie was worried that her son Paul would inherit his father's problems with addiction. For that reason, Maggie started to ask him to spend more time with her to help her out with the dog kennels. Now, that piece of information was widely reported, so many have questioned whether or not it was Maggie's effort to spend more time with Paul and have him help her out with the dog kennels to keep him out of trouble. Was that why they were together at the dog kennels at Moselle on the evening that they were murdered? It's really such a sad story. The story about the bounced check at the luncheon has been widely circulated, and some people believe that story to be true. Some think it is just a wives' tale that has grown from the story of Alec and Maggie Murdaugh, but this is what we do know about Maggie Murdaugh's finances. Colton County probate documents filed 10 months after the deaths of Maggie and Paul reveal a troubling financial state for Maggie Murdaugh. At the time of her death, she was 52 years old, a mother of 2, and she was known to flaunt expensive clothes and purses. There is an interesting moment in the body camera footage in the investigation of the murders after the murders at Moselle when 2 investigators are going through the garbage at the Moselle estate and they come across a $12,000 Gucci bill.
It's Gucci. $1,221. Take it.
The documents that Alex Murdaugh's brother, John Marvin, filed in probate court present a confusing and likely incomplete picture of Maggie Murdaugh's finances at the time of her death. So here's what can be learned from the documents that were filed on March 22nd, 2022 in Colton County Probate Court. The main question that can be asked is, was Maggie Murdaugh really cash poor? Well, according to the documents, Maggie Murdaugh had just $57.77 left in her Bank of America account, the only bank account that was solely in Maggie Murdaugh's name at the time of her death. In Maggie Murdaugh and Alex Murdaugh's joint Palmetto State bank account, Maggie's share only amounted to $4,154.14. Now, that could be a decent amount of money for a lot of people. But remember, Alex and Maggie Murdaugh were supposed to be wealthy. They were supposed to be rich, like rich. So $4,154 and change ain't that much left in her share of their joint bank account. Now, that joint bank account was their wealthiest joint bank account. It's reported, well, according to the court documents, that one of their joint bank accounts only had $16 remaining, $16 left in that joint bank account. It has also been widely reported that Maggie Murdaugh was pawning her belongings on Poshmark, which is a website where you can sell brand name clothing and items like bags and shoes and jewelry. Apparently, she sold a pair of coat shoes for $27. This is not the behavior of really wealthy people. So did Maggie Murdaugh have an indication that their finances were circling the drain? So given what we know about the state of the Murdaugh's bank accounts, the correct and responsible question to ask is, did someone drain Maggie's accounts around the time she died? Or were the Murdaughs in deep financial trouble that June? So deep that they only had $16 left in one of their joint bank accounts. It is possible that these aren't all of the accounts that Maggie Murdaugh had access to prior to her death. John Marvin listed these accounts in the section Joint with Right of Survivorship, specifically where he was asked to list any non-probate property jointly owned by Maggie Murdaugh. According to the documents, the total amount of money listed in Maggie Murdaugh's account couldn't pay her mortgages. Maggie appeared to be asset rich, sort of. At the time of her death, Maggie Murdaugh had an estimated worth of $4,160,000 total in real estate holdings between her ownership of the Moselle property and the Adesto home. Maggie Murdaugh was the sole owner of Moselle after Alex sold it to her in 2016 for $5 plus love and affection. However, around $2,178,669 was owed in mortgages on both of the properties. And when you break down those numbers of what was owed on which property, the situation looks even worse. $847,287 was owed on the $1 million Moselle mortgage that was initiated in 2015. $1,122,852 and change was owed on the second Moselle mortgage of $1,311,000 and change from 2013. And $208,000 plus was owed on the Adesto mortgage. The home was purchased by Maggie and Alex in 2002 for $415,000. So that home, they were making some good money on that, but they still owed half of what the property was purchased for. So as many of you have probably already figured out, when you look at all these numbers, the only conclusion one can make is that it appears that they were not paying their mortgages. According to the probate documents, Maggie owned an estimated $111,500 in other assets. This included $85,000, which was the value of our 2021 Mercedes, $12,000, which is the value of our 2014 Ford F-150, $8,000 for the value of another Ford F-150, and $6,500, the value of a 2012 Land Rover, $0 for household furniture, goods, and appliances. One of the biggest questions that came about shortly after the murders of Maggie and Paul is, did Maggie Murdaugh have a life insurance policy? And unfortunately, the documents that were brought forth in court do not provide a full answer. In the probate filings, John Marvin wrote none when asked to list the insurance on the life of the decedent, which is payable to the estate. He also wrote none under life insurance that would be payable to the beneficiaries. However, sources close to the investigation have said that they have a hard time believing that Maggie Murdaugh didn't have a life insurance policy. I mean, let's think about it. For nearly a century, the 4 generations of the legal Murdaughs made millions of dollars by suing insurance companies through their law firm. Does it make sense that Maggie Murdaugh would not have a life insurance policy, especially when we know for a fact that Alex Murdaugh had a big life insurance policy on himself? Remember, after his alleged suicide for hire ordeal, he told police that the main reason he wanted Eddie Smith to shoot him on the side of the road that day was so his son Buster could collect on his $10 million life insurance policy. So is it possible that there was a life insurance policy on Maggie that wasn't listed? Well, according to the experts that I've talked to and sources that I've done research on, the answer is yeah, sure it is. What else do we know about Maggie Murdaugh's state of finances from the court documents that are available for us to see? On top of owing more than $2 million in mortgages at the time of her death, Maggie Murdaugh also owed $2,435 to Coastal Electric Cooperative, Inc., likely for unpaid electric bills. Additionally, she owed $6,500 for unpaid bills to a Somerville interior design company. The bills were due in April and June of 2021. Some of the items that were placed at the Moselle home before Maggie was murdered include $3,400 vintage curtains with English linen print, $2,500 drapery panels fabricated in khaki and black antelope print, $500 small stuffed pheasant, $180 for Turkish rug pillows. While these might seem like strange details to report on, these bills do raise a lot of questions. If Maggie was truly cash poor, why would she be spending this kind of money on redecorating Moselle, a property that apparently she didn't really even care for? She also owed more than $1,300 on her Belk Rewards MasterCard and more than $500 on an Amazon credit card. Considering that Moselle was solely in Maggie Murdaugh's name and the Edisto property was in Maggie and Alex's name, and some of the bills to which she owed money, like the interior decorator and her personal Belk card and her Amazon card, these are all financial situations that Maggie Murdaugh would absolutely have to have awareness of. So it seems that Maggie Murdaugh had to have some idea that their finances were not on the up and up, or they were at least not as good as the Murdaughs presented to the rest of the world. According to the Murdaughmurders podcast, one of Manny Matney's sources, Kim Brandt, who is a Hampton local, said that Maggie Murdaugh always seemed to be very happy with her marriage to Alex Murdaugh. She said, and I quote, that Maggie thought that she had a real prize when she married Alex Murdaugh. She also said that Maggie tended to value status above all else. She valued status above relationships, above wealth, above anything in the world. Status was the absolute most valuable attribute one could have, according to Maggie Murdaugh. This same sentiment is echoed by many others who knew Maggie Murdaugh. According to Kim Brandt, who is a source for Mandy Matney and the Murdaughmurders podcast, she did not believe that there was any truth in the rumor that Maggie Murdaugh was talking to a divorce attorney or was in any way looking to get a divorce from Alex Murdaugh. According to Kim Brandt, the status that came along with being Alex Murdaugh's wife was far too valuable for Maggie to give up.
I don't believe that they were getting a divorce, and I don't believe that their marriage was deteriorated to the point where she was doing anything but trying to protect her status. They're not going to allow their son to go to jail, and they certainly aren't going to allow anyone to take all of their money and property. So they were just in protect our status mode.
Kim Brandt goes on to do the simple math and to say some things out loud that some people perhaps are not willing to say out loud.
Just sitting back and wondering, knowing all that they had and all that they did, the trips that they took and the vehicles that they drove and education, because Buster went to a private university and Paul went to private school after he was kicked out of Wade Hampton. So you're talking about private schools and college tuition and vacation homes and hunting lodges and Range Rovers and big trucks, and that's a lot of money.
We circle back to how apparently upset Maggie was when that check bounced at the charity luncheon and the pressure that many people claim that she was applying to Alex Murdaugh in the months before his death. From what we have learned through the trial of the murder of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, we know that Alex Murdaugh has been stealing from his clients to the tune of at least $9.3 million that has been tallied up and that we know about since 2011, for a full decade before the deaths of Maggie and Paul. So although we might not know exactly how much Maggie knew about Alex Murdaugh's financial entanglements or how much pressure she was putting on Alex Murdaugh to make more, to bring home more money, to bring home more bacon, we can conclude that the pressure from Maggie to Alex regarding their finances had to have been substantial. And when the world was falling down on Alex Murdaugh, when Jeannie Seckinger came into his office on June 7th, 2010, and started to ask him questions that he knew would eventually lead down the path of his firm finding out what he had done, that he had stolen from them and from his clients, combined with the pressure that was coming down in 3 days from June 7th, 2021, when the hearing for the boating accident civil case was scheduled on June 10th, 2021, when Mark Tinsley had filed a motion with the court to compel Alex Murdaugh's financial records to be fully released. That is a whole lot of pressure Alex Murdaugh was facing. And was it that final bit of pressure that was applied by Alex Murdaugh's wife, Maggie Murdaugh, that provided the motive for murder? As Kim Brandt, Hampton local, who knew Maggie Murdaugh, said, she said, I don't believe they're getting a divorce, and I don't believe that their marriage has deteriorated, and I think that Maggie is just fighting for their marriage. She is fighting for their marriage to keep her status, to keep their money, to keep their assets, and of course, to keep their son Paul out of jail. Is it possible that on that day, June 7th, 2021, Alex Murdaugh knew that those things that Maggie Murdaugh was trying to protect so dearly, not allowing her son to go to jail, to protect their status and to protect their wealth and their money, that those things were no longer able to be protected because of what he had done?